With just one day out from the start of the regular 2022 NFL season, we're going to look at the most hyped players and which of their cards are moving the best in some pricing analysis, and look at and see if there are any plays left to be made based on a fully updated hype index chart of the top 250 most hyped NFL players heading into week 1. So let's dig in. So let's quickly touch on what the hype index is comprised of so you get an idea of how that score is generated. It starts off with expectations. Expectations are all centered around performance, and that can be boiled down to fantasy points, because fantasy points are generated by scoring touchdowns, putting up passing yards, putting up receptions, receiving yards, and rushing touchdowns. The whole gambit of production can be boiled down into fantasy points. So we've got a scoring system based on the expected or projected fantasy points for any given player this weekend. And then we've got their Hall of Fame marker score. This is comprised of a formula based on whether or not they're going to make it into the Hall of Fame, how many Pro Bowls they've had, how many elite seasons they've had. And then we're going to look at a formula for how old they are, right? If they're a 2022 rookie, I'm going to give them a 15-point bonus because of the whole FOMO, or fear of missing out factor, that drives the football card market so wild, right? And people wanting to get in on that next generational talent before they break out. Everybody's got that story of buying into Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes before they broke out. And the same thing goes with guys like Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson. Jonathan Taylor was not off to a hot start in his rookie year. So there's a lot of those stories out there. So when we look at the age score of a player, we're also taking into account their draft capital, right? There's a much higher hit rate. A player gets a lot more opportunities if they were taken in the first round. They're also printed in more sets, more card variations if they were drafted in the first 3 rounds compared to if they were drafted in the 6th or 7th. But of course, we have to take note, because if they were drafted in the 6th or 7th, then that means, and they do break out, that means that their cards could go up exponentially higher because of the very limited supply. A prime example is a guy like George Kittle or Austin Eckler with only 23 different rookie cards to his name. So when you look at his base rookie card, that can easily get up to $15, $20, $30, even though he's a undersized running back. And then the last factor is really a team score. And so after we have, a team score is comprised of the Vegas odds of them making it to the playoffs and the Super Bowl. It's also comprised of the ESPN power rankings, and then it's also comprised of Trackalytics. How many Facebook page likes do they have? What's the size of population in their geographical region that's going to have every single one of their games televised? So once again, looking at how many potential people could these highlights, these big performances, be exposed to? How big is their fan base? How many collectors could there possibly be out there for any specific team or player? Now let's dig into the hype index chart. Now that you know the factors that go into it, let's actually dig into the hype index chart. Look at who is most hyped up. Of course, it's led by quarterbacks, but then we're going to talk about the most hyped wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends, and look at what I consider their gold standard rookie card, what that average resale value is, and everything. And if you're new here, obviously, if you want to stay up to date with everything that we just touched on, the latest and greatest in football card and football activity, make sure you hit that subscribe button, that little bell notification icon, so you don't miss out on a single step. So leading the way is Tom Brady, the GOAT, and this is primarily driven based off his current expectation this weekend, this Sunday night against the Dallas Cowboys, of putting up roughly 22 fantasy points. He's got a hype index score of 47.1 because he's got that 15 score on the Hall of Fame marker for being the GOAT. And the team score of Tampa Bay is also pretty solid, buoyed by the fact that they are held pretty high in the Vegas odds and the ESPN power rankings. You can see his gold standard card is the base Bowman and Bowman Chrome. Here's the population of the 8, 9, 10 of the base, the 8, 9, 10 of the Chrome, and their average resale value. Now this card is down some percent over what it used to be at. And this is one of those situations where you have to ask yourself, you have to go back before the modern sports card boom in the summer of 2020 and look at where these prices were at when he was already the GOAT then. And then he came to the Bucks and won another Super Bowl with the modern sports card boom and the fact he's only got 135 different rookie cards. This really propelled the values of his cards to an entirely new stratosphere. But he is still the most hyped NFL player heading into the 2022 season, a season which he could fall off in the season. This could be his last year. So if you're looking for that peak on Brady, you definitely want to hold these until the playoffs. But, there is some potential to buy in right now. I would definitely stick with the graded cards because of how many reprints and fakes are out there. Number 2 is Justin Herbert, because he gets a 10-point bonus for being a third-year player. He also has already had 2 elite seasons. His expectations this weekend against the Las Vegas Raiders, a divisional rival, at home are 22.1, and the Los Angeles Chargers, with the market size, the fan base, the ESPN power rankings, and the Vegas odds also give him a 10. He's our second most hyped NFL player right now heading into 2022. You can see that his prices are considerably lower, but that's because Justin Herbert has approximately 4,000 different rookie cards compared to Tom Brady's 135. On average, his PSA 10 base Prism goes for about $330. Now, you may be asking, what is this compared to Joe Burrow? Where's Joe Burrow at? Joe Burrow is actually my number 8 most hyped NFL player heading into the season, and that's primarily because he does have difficult matchup this weekend against Pittsburgh, coming off that appendicitis. And the Cincinnati Bengals don't have nearly the same market size fan base as the Los Angeles Chargers. So when we do a 2020 QB Prism PSA 10 study, and let's just look at some of the most hyped players from 2020 to give you a quick comparison. This comping process is always very important to me. You want to try and comp out guys across their same draft class as much as possible. So here we have Herbert, my number 2, Burrow at my number 8. Jalen Hurts is right there next to Joe Burrow at my number 9. Here's Jalen Hurts. And that Philadelphia market size is massive, right? It is massive. He's also the same age as Joe Burrow, and he has a lot of expectation for him this year with A.J. Brown. They've got the Detroit Lions week 1, so this should be a smash spot for him. So this begs the question, how does the actual production compare to the expectation going in? So the actual fantasy points generated from the player compared to what they were expected to do offset each other. The expectation becomes a negative number that takes away from the production, right? When you want to offset each other, you take production as the actual number of fantasy points that they put up, and then you take away what they were expected to do, and whatever you're left over with, if that's a positive number, then that's good. Then that means they exceeded expectations, and if their team won, then that means their card value should go up. The demand should go up, and we should see that translate over into the market immediately during, after the game in the subsequent days. But if they underperform compared to the expectations, and the team loses, now all of a sudden that's a recipe for dropping demand, dropping card values. For that reason, both Jalen Hurts and Tua are sell now for me. Tua is actually my number 20th most hyped ranked player, and you can see Jordan Love has now fallen all the way down here now that we've gotten closer to the season. He's no longer getting those preseason performances that had his PSA 10 up to $60 on his base Prism, and you can see how that relevancy plays into account there. You can see where Burrow and Herbert about 260 to 300, and Jalen Hurts and Tua. Jalen Hurts has pretty high expectations, and his card values are definitely up from where they were before they signed A.J. Brown. And if he does not live up to those expectations, or the Eagles do not win, these card values will fall off. The same thing with Tua, the same thing with Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, although Joe Burrow will be given a little bit longer of a leash because he just was at a Super Bowl, and we know he has that ability to make those postseason pushes come down the stretch. So people are going to give him a little bit longer leash. Plus, he's the number 1 overall draft pick, and that definitely helps out a lot as well. Patrick Mahomes is my number 3 most hyped NFL player heading into the season. You can see the difference here between his Optic 8, 9, 10 and the Prism 8, 9, and 10. And look at that population count of the Prism 10. So you can definitely see that that card has a little bit lower than a 50% gem rate. Also, the Optic 10 has a pretty solid. The optic has a pretty solid gen rate, and then also look at the price differences here. This is like comparing a Prism to a Topps Chrome for a guy like Russell Wilson, or this could be like comparing a Topps Chrome or a base Topps to a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who just so happens to be my number 5 most hyped up quarterback right now after Josh Allen. Josh Allen is at the number 4 spot. Currently, his base Donruss PSA 10 is selling for on average about $280 to $300. You can definitely see that those expectations, the previous 2 years of finishing as the QB1, have that baked into his card value, and that's where we talk about expectations. And so when we go back a year and you look at what happened last year, they lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 1. They've got a tough matchup tomorrow night against the Rams. A lot of people are betting, according to Vegas, they're betting on Buffalo to win this game. However, the Rams are the reigning Super Bowl champs. If they come out healthy and Matt Stafford is a tough guy, then I could see the Rams potentially upsetting the Bills on Thursday night. This would definitely cause a hit to the values of Josh Allen's cards, because when you actually compare them and you do a 2018 Prism comparison here, let's do a 2018 Donruss comparison. Just look at how much higher Josh Allen is than Lamar Jackson, who had that insane 2019 MVP run. He's come all the way down to under $100 for his base Donruss PSA 10. Not too much higher than Kyler Murray. Baker Mayfield's still about that $50 price point, and he's got that juicy week 1 matchup. So if you're looking for a guy to buy into right now, I would just immediately go to him as the number 1 overall draft pick from 2018. And now he's on a new team, got the chip on his shoulder, healthy, and playing his old team in week 1 with an above average defense and great supporting cast there in Carolina. So definitely looking for Baker to make a big statement here through the first couple weeks. He's definitely a big buy low, buy now candidate for me. And you can see the massive disparity there. Even if Baker's cards just go up to 100, and this is a low market for Lamar, then you're making some pretty decent money there. Whereas Josh Allen's already got tremendous amount of success, so he's got to keep that going. He's got to win tomorrow night. He's also got to come close to or exceed those expectations of 23.8 fantasy points against the Rams, but also definitely a win. That is the one factor, the differentiator between fantasy and football cards. That is important because it's closely tied during the season to the MVP narrative. The MVP narrative is made up of a panel of judges like Chris Collinsworth and Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, and these guys, and wins play a big factor into this. It should be no surprise that Jamar Chase is our most hyped wide receiver, and you're going to see just an insane amount of variety on his rookie cards, and especially with new sets just being released, you could definitely argue that the Silver Prism cards of Jamar Chase, that's just a really pretty card for that cheap. I mean, that's definitely worth some flyers. This is a card that could get up to $15, but look at what the Silver Field Level Prism is going for. We know it's a short print card, probably around 150 copies or so, something like that. You know, it doesn't have a serial number, but with that short print designation, we know that it's just not as widely printed as the other ones. Like this is a variation, and it's an optic holo. And some of these cards people shy away from because they want that printed scarcity on the card with a serial number like this right here out of $299 going for $80. It's an interesting tiny little buy window, I think, for some of these more common Jamar Chase cards, because there is a potential. Now, this is the interesting thing, right? The Bengals could need to get off to a hot start against the Steelers this weekend. He's going to be matched up probably against Mika Fitzpatrick, but T. Higgins can draw that coverage as well, and because he's also very good, very high on my hype index chart. And the expectations for Jamar Chase are only 15.7 in a half PPR format, so he is projected to be a stud, but if his team wins, he can definitely kind of ride that wave with them. And even if he just outperforms and they lose and he puts up 30 fantasy points, some crazy highlights, we could also see people all of a sudden buying more and more, if that's even possible. I mean, look at all these transactions just from today. It's going to take a lot for these base cards to get up to a higher price tier, but anything rare I mean, you're really just holding at this point, potentially trying to buy in. He's one guy that you probably want to spend up a little bit to get into, but, you know, he definitely is affected by the fact that the Bengals have a smaller fan base than some of these other teams. Like, for example, Cooper Kupp, even though he's several years older than Jamar Chase, on here for me is my number 19th ranked most hyped player. Najee Harris is my number 1 most hyped running back in the league, and that's because of the market size of the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's because of his rookie status. He's only a second-year player, and he's incredibly hyped up. He also has a bell cow workload expectation, man. You can see this translated into his rook yard values. If you were to actually compare what his rook yards are selling for compared to Jonathan Taylor, you're going to find it's very, very similar, guys. And there's a lot more success baked into the prices of these cards that I think he will actually live up to this year with the strength of the offensive line and the quarterback play. But obviously, it's yet to be seen. He's going to get a long leash. He's a first-round draft pick from Alabama. He's only in his second year. But with that Liz Frank sprain in his foot, I'm definitely a little nervous on him. I'd lean on the side of selling him now and buying back in later in the season. The Steelers have a difficult schedule. They could lose a variety of different games this year, including week 1 against the Bengals, at which point you could probably buy back in a much lower price point on Najee in November, whereas Jonathan Taylor may continue to slowly have prices climb throughout the season. It should be no surprise, but Travis Kelce is our most hyped tight end in the league right now, and it's based on those expectations, based on the Hall of Fame marker score that he gets of an 8. And right now, the Kansas City Chiefs do have a much larger fan base over the past few years, thanks to Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Andy Reid and everything they've been able to accomplish, the Super Bowls, the NFC Championship wins, the AFC Championship wins, the Super Bowl victory, the Super Bowl appearances, and so, you know, Travis Kelce is definitely a massive byproduct of that, and virtually a lock for the Hall of Fame at this point. And you can see his most iconic card is that 2013 Topps Chrome, 2013 Prism. I would lean on the side of the Topps Chrome. I think the picture is more iconic. It's a more recognizable card. I don't like the practice uniform thing here. I like the Under Armour shirt a little bit better. You know, your choices are definitely limited. The Score Retro also comes into play here. You can see that PSA 10 actually going for $137.50. It's only got a pop of $212, so there is a big difference there, whereas his Prism PSA 10 has a pop of $269. You can see that's down just a little bit. His numbers have regressed over the past 2 years, so it's yet to be seen if he can live up to the still gaudy expectations of him putting up 15 to 20 fantasy points per game and kind of leading the league and receiving, or is he actually going to fall off? And are the Chiefs going to lose some games? They've got a very difficult schedule, you know, starting week 1 at Arizona, you know, in Arizona, so they have a very interesting dynamic right now. Arizona, Kyler Murray cards are very much down. I'm very much out on Kyler Murray and Arizona right now because of how tumultuous of a situation it is, how many question marks there are in Arizona. All right, guys, that's all the time we have for today. I got to get out of here, but I'll be back live Friday morning breaking down all the action from Thursday night, doing a lot more, answering anything. Ask me anything in that live stream on Friday morning, and I'll dissect any of these players and their cards that you guys want me to dig into. And if you want the full hype index chart, just head over to patreon.com/footballcards. You can download that, access that. That's in our Discord chat about it 24/7 with pros like me on the quest. I'll see you there. Peace.